Hey everybody, what's up? Thanks for listening to the Catch a Pocket podcast. I am your host, Lori Burris. I'm coming to you from Park City, Kansas. This is a podcast about finding inspiration in what's around you, and I chose artists and culture to be who I like to interview on my podcast in my local and regional area or from here or whatnot. I hope to branch out with this in the future. My guest tonight is Mr. Jedd Beaudoin, award-winning writer and broadcaster who's been with our local radio station, KMUW, for the past decade, almost 12 years now. He's the host and producer of Strange Currency. It's a 2-hour music show which airs Monday through Saturday from 8 to 10 Central Time here in Wichita, Kansas on 89.1 KMUW FM on your dial. I encourage you to give it a listen. I make a habit of listening to it anytime I have the radio playing from 8 to 10. So it's awesome. You learn a lot about music. You get to hear things that you wouldn't normally. And listening to Jedd, he also does interviewing with national artists, either that are playing a show that week or that month at a local venue, or they're local or regional artists that are touring or playing a show in the area, have an album out. And it is a great pleasure to listen to Jedd. He makes you feel that you are getting a knowledgeable, thought-provoking window into a small piece of the artist that he's interviewing, and I wish I could do the same. I listen and always think, wow, it's just great to listen to his quality of work. Since he hosts Strange Currency on KMUW, the show itself is an eclectic smorgasbord of tasty musical treats, both from near and far. Also, Jedd sometimes will go on Facebook and ask you what it is that makes you think of this or that, and hundreds of people will type in their answer or put a link to the song. It's super interesting, and I find it engaging and fun. I will add a link to my Podbean webpage with all of Jedd's links to his Facebook or Twitter, his email address if you want to get to know Jedd a little better or have a question for him. When we recorded this podcast a few weeks back, it was Jedd's dad's 94th birthday. He has already passed, but I felt like we kind of didn't get to talk about that the way I wanted to, and so I just wanted to tell him happy birthday belated to your dad. And so also, when I was recording this, I was talking to my son about coming on the podcast maybe in the future. And he said maybe we could talk about video games. But while I was talking to him, he was supposed to be reading a book. And he chose, right now he's reading The Body by Stephen King, which if you know about Stand By Me, the movie, that's what it's based on. But the very first line on that is, the most important things are the hardest to say. They are the things you get ashamed of because words diminish them. Words shrink things that seem limitless when they were in your head to no more than living size when they are brought out. But it's more than that, isn't it? The most important things lie too close to wherever your secret heart is buried. Like landmarks to a treasure your enemies would love to steal away. And you may make revelations that cost you dearly, only to have people look at you in a funny way, not understanding what you said at all, or why you thought it was so important that you almost cried when you were saying it. That's the worst, I think. When the secret stays locked within, not for want of a teller, but for want of an understanding ear. And then it goes on to when I was 12, going on 13. That part. But I think that part in the beginning kind of explains this podcast and the need to be heard by everyone. And I hope we continue to do this. I hope I can continue to keep it up. I thank everyone for participating thus far. I could just go on forever. It's been real fun. All right, so let's catch a pocket with Jedd Beaudoin. So, okay, Jedd.
All right.
Thank you so much for coming. And
You bet.
basically, you're much more experienced in interviewing people than this gal is. But I'm learning as I go. And you're the 8th guest on the podcast, and I really appreciate you coming. And I was just going to see if you would like to kind of tell, were you born in Wichita or were you born elsewhere?
Yeah, no, I grew up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, so
Wow. You're a long way from
I'm
there.
a long way from home. There are as many people on that peninsula, actually probably fewer now, as there are in all of Wichita.
Wow.
So, I mean, we lived in this, at that time, I think the population in my hometown peaked at about 1,000 people, somewhere around 1980, and it's currently like 700 and some people.
Wow.
So, a lot of farming, not much else, and
Near water?
Yeah, we had not quite in our backyard, but the next, we had a neighbor behind us, and his house was basically just on the river.
Uh-huh.
And then in the springtime, back when they used to have heavy snowfalls, everything would melt and it would sort of flood like the lower part of his yard. So you'd see picnic tables floating by.
Oh, wow. So very close. Yeah.
Yeah.
What was the town called?
Stevenson.
Stevenson?
Yeah.
In the northern peninsula of...
Yeah, Upper Peninsula, Michigan. So an hour and a half north of Green Bay.
Okay, so everyone was Green Bay Packer fans.
Yeah,
and,
exactly.
What else? So
Lions.
The Lions?
Lions.
Okay.
So I was sort of indoctrinated to be a Packers fan by my cousin and my classmates at school. My mom was a Lions fan. And then, of course, if neither one of those teams were doing particularly well, you could always just go with the Minnesota Vikings. So.
Okay. Vikings were a safe bet.
Yeah.
Because they were always pretty good.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, it's a nice little proximity because then, too, Minneapolis is only about 5 hours away. Milwaukee's like 5 hours.
Oh, okay.
So
it's kind of like going less than going to Denver from here.
exactly.
So you would go on like family outing trips type things to the big
Almost
towns?
never.
Did you guys go on vacation or did you kind of stay home?
There were, let's see, so when I was probably 7 or 8, we went to California, to Los Angeles. So my mom
Disneyland or?
yeah, we did go to Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm. Was it Space Mountain?
Space Mountain.
Is that in Disneyland?
I'm not really certain on that. I was there when I was 3. Magic Mountain.
Magic Mountain.
Is that in Disneyland?
No, that's another
Theme
amusement
park,
park, yeah. And then, of course, SeaWorld. At that time,
okay.
we drove down to San Diego.
Cool.
So we did that, and then that also put us in, we flew out of Chicago, and so I had an aunt and uncle on my dad's side who lived there. We went down and saw them a couple of times, but
Yeah.
there were, like, most of our trips were, like, family sort of thing. So I have,
Okay.
everybody in my family basically was, like, a big-time football player, except for me. I played a little bit in high school, but my brothers played in college.
Oh, wow.
So a lot of times we'd do this, like, 9-hour trek to the Lower Peninsula.
Wow, yeah.
To, like, overnight, my dad would work until 11 o'clock, get home, we'd get in the car, and we'd drive overnight to go to my brother's football game.
Yeah, to a big game.
Yeah.
When they were playing at home or whatever.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. So how many brothers do you have?
I have 5 older brothers.
Wow, so you are from a large Catholic family.
I'm from
It's all boys?
all boys,
Holy cow.
and I'm the youngest by 9 years.
And is your mom and dad still alive or?
So the day we're recording this actually would have been my dad's 94th birthday.
Oh, okay.
And then my mom will turn 84 Is that right? Yeah, 84, the 27th. So.
Okay, and she's still living? Is she still in Minnesota? I mean,
no,
Michigan?
She lives in a Detroit suburb.
Okay.
And I have my next oldest brother, who I sort of usurped as the youngest. He and his wife live close by, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you went to college in Wisconsin, is that right?
Yeah, so there was a neat thing. It's kind of interesting because right now there's this controversy, I guess, like people are picking on kids who go to junior colleges, like it's somehow...
Oh, like it's less than?
Yeah.
Okay.
And since we were right on the border, there was reciprocity in my county in Michigan with the county in Wisconsin. So you could get in-state tuition.
Cool, yeah.
And
like a sister college type thing or a sister state.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I did that for 2 years, and then I went to University of Wisconsin Whitewater, which is, there again, it's, I don't know, 45 minutes from Madison, which is the capital.
Okay.
And then 45 minutes from Milwaukee, and then like an hour and 15 from Madison, which is the capital, and then 2 hours from Chicago.
Okay.
So it's
kind of like this middle area where a suburb area or something like that.
Yeah, it's like this little farming town of maybe like 10,000 people, and then during the school year, everybody kind of pours into it. That county is sort of referred to as Illinois' playground because a lot of people have summer homes in Lake Geneva, which is pretty close by.
Like little campsite type cabins or big...
I mean, these are,
money.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, wow.
It's a
beautiful area.
Yeah, the Wrigley family had like a pretty big spot up there.
That is fancy.
Yeah.
So there you studied English and
I started off
writing?
as a theater major, actually.
Okay.
I wanted to act. And I wasn't particularly good at remembering lines.
Oh, okay. I wouldn't be either, I don't think. So I feel for you.
Yeah. So I did that. I came in as a theater major, and then they were kind of pressuring me. At some point, you have to declare a minor. And a lot of my friends were English minors, and I thought, well, I'll probably wind up teaching high school. I'll be the drama coach.
You saw your future as that kind of in that role.
And that's what I'll do. So I'll take an English minor. And I took a literature for the adolescent class as my first class. And I had this wonderful professor, Dennis Trudell, who was also a poet and fiction writer. And he encouraged us to do creative writing, write little stories. And I'd been writing poems and stories probably since I was about 7 or 8 years old.
Okay.
And he said, wow, this is really good,
So he kind of mentored you and took you under his wing and taught you a lot of things.
And he said, you should come back and take some more English classes in the fall. And I said, I will, because that's what I'm going to. And once I started taking the courses that fall to build up my minor, because I needed, 36 credits or something like that. I just fell in love with it, and theater very quickly kind of fell by the wayside.
Well, it took the back seat to this other passion.
Yeah, so I switched them around, and I had more than enough credits at that point for a theater minor.
You got the major in the English and the minor in the theater?
Yeah, theater performance.
Cool.
Yeah.
So then, at that point, what were you, what was your trajectory or what happened? And
so the one of the more interesting things that I've done is while I was in college, I got a job working at a group home for adults with chronic mental illness and developmental disabilities, and I did that for 4 years. By the 4th year, I'd been hired as a supervisor. So basically, I was
worked your way up.
I was in charge of the region when daytime management was gone.
Okay.
So I would, we had a
Was
guy.
that the night shift then?
Yeah, it would be like 2 in the afternoon until 1 in the morning or something.
Oh, okay, like a second shift type deal.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so things like we had a client with severe autism who was also diabetic, and he snuck into the pantry one night at one of the facilities and ate half a bag of powdered sugar. So
wow. You wonder why people do things sometimes.
So I would have to go and sit with him at the hospital while he they're like, we don't know if he's going to make it.
Right. Was he in a coma?
He was very close. His eyes, that was one of the most frightening things ever, because I could just see his eyes turning glassy.
Oh wow, like the life force leaving.
Yeah, and he was man, he was on his way out, and then it was almost like E.T. in the way that he sprang back eventually, because then he just looked at me, and he would kind of talk gibberish. And so if he liked somebody, he would refer to them as CBS.
Okay.
And he'd go, "I'm gonna make it, CBS."
Okay. Well, that makes you feel better.
Yeah. I was like, hey, I'm in the CBS crowd.
All right, David Letterman and me.
So I didn't know. I mean, at that time, I thought maybe because I was right at the point where if I had stayed another year, I'd be able to buy into the company. Essentially, I'd be able to make
like employee type shareholder things.
And I was pretty good at it. They liked me, but I also had this bug to write fiction. And so that year that I was in that sort of supervisory role, I thought, well, through encouragement from my advisor, I'll apply to some grad schools, see what happens.
Right.
If something happens, then I'll go with that. If not, I guess I'll do this until...
This was meant to be or that was meant to be. Kind of throw it in.
Yeah. So I applied to a number of schools and got into a couple of them. And Wichita State was the best of the ones that I went. I came down and visited. And
you liked it?
Yeah. I felt at home here.
Good. Yeah.
So
we have a way of doing that, I think, here. I always feel fairly comfortable, usually, depending on... if I were at some kind of crazy thing that I wasn't really interested in, I might feel a little out of place and have to get the hell out of there. But but for the most part, people are friendly and helpful.
Yeah, and that was I met with a couple of people who were grad students at the time, and I came down in the fall of '98. I quit my job in Wisconsin. They were. It was like right at the year mark of doing it. And it was kind of funny because I'd taken it just a year earlier. So it was perfect in a way because my boss at the time, she said, well, we're going to try this for a year so you're safe.
For 1 year.
For 1 year. If it doesn't work, then, we'll find a place for you. And by the end, it was doing so well that I actually had an assistant. Okay. And so... the year came up, and I said, I'm going to grad school, but I didn't have to worry because they already had somebody ready to slide in.
Shoes there. That's cool. And you don't feel like you're leaving people in the lurch or anything like that. And you're able to start your new master's degree program.
Yeah.
And that was is that where you're getting in the radio part of things? Or?
No. So my goal in coming to the creative writing program at Wichita State was that I was going to work on a collection of short stories, try and publish some of my work, and then hopefully get a professorship probably at a junior college or a state school. And that's really what I thought I was going to be doing. So I graduated in 2001, and then my wife at that time had a teaching exchange through the Fulbright organization. So we went to Poland for a year.
Oh, cool.
And at the end of my graduate studies, I still was writing fiction at a pretty good clip.
Right.
But, you send out a story, you spend $200 sending out a story, it gets rejected. Yeah. And then finally somebody takes it and you get paid $50.
Right, yeah. Or you have worked on something 3 years and no one ever takes it or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was getting some hits on things. And then I saw that this was like the early days of the internet, and I saw that one of my favorite musicians, a guy named Mike Keneally, who used to play with Frank Zappa, later played with Steve Vai, has his own stuff, was going to write for this website. And I was like, well, this sounds cool because they were going to do like film and politics and music. And
cool. Which one was that?
It's called None for You, Dear.
None for You, Dear.
None for You, Dear. noneforyoudear.com. It's not there anymore.
Right.
Now, the film wound up being, because Rich, the guy who ran it, Rich Pike, he had friends in the adult entertainment industry. Okay. So that was the film.
Oh, man. Okay.
So
roll with the flow.
Yeah. So I was like, oh, okay.
Okay. I was thinking something else. But
Yeah. But I started doing music reviews for him, and he was really receptive.
Cool.
Really positive about it.
Nice person, and
yeah,
like wanted to prop you up and help you get some of those doorways open.
Yeah, and I mean, I was really blown away because it wasn't something I envisioned, right?
Right.
And so he had, at that time, he was working as Steve Vai's assistant, and he was pretty busy because it was, Steve Vai has all these endorsements, and so
right.
Rich would be kind of the middleman. Like, Steve doesn't like the way that the distortion sounds on this particular pedal, and
so he was really right in there with all of that right-hand man type thing.
Yeah. Okay. So he stopped. He wasn't able to do the site on a regular basis.
Right.
But he was also working for Vai's label, which was called Favored Nations, and he would just send me records.
Oh, cool.
And he'd say, see if you can place these someplace.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, you got to be kidding! You're like giving me all this support now, understanding that they wanted coverage for someplace, but I didn't have any. Rich was my outlet.
Right. He was the one that you were going to for that, and he was now coming back to you and saying, "See if you can do something."
Yeah, and it was like mind blowing. So I was used to pounding the pavement trying to find outlets with fiction.
Uh-huh.
So I thought, well, there are all these websites now. There's all these niche websites, for this type of heavy metal or this type of bluegrass or this type of whatever.
Yeah,
so,
even getting more prominent now.
Yeah. So I just hunted down ones that I thought would fit with the music that Rich was sending my way.
Right.
And
the kind you liked as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I wound up connecting with this guy in Lower Michigan, John Kotzian, who had a site called Yetza Jam, which was it initially was kind of a Dream Theater tribute site, fan site.
Okay.
And then it kind of expanded there to cover a lot of progressive rock and heavy metal.
Cool.
And somehow in the summer of 2001, I hooked up with John, and then I was pretty much his right-hand man there for, probably 3 or 4 years. I contributed pretty heavily to that. Yeah.
To that website?
Yep.
Okay, and so
Yep.
from there you learned a lot about website, and like with this, I'm learning about podcasts. Every time I produce one, then I learn something, and produce one and learn something. So kind of that same thing.
Yeah, it was all of a sudden I'm getting emails like, do you want to interview this person? Do you want to interview that person? And so sometimes I was doing, I don't know, in a week I might do like 3 or 4 interviews.
Wow.
And not necessarily always people who I was overly familiar with their music.
Right.
But it just,
you had to research them ahead of time and kind of understand where they were coming from and then go from there kind of thing.
And occasionally there would be somebody who I like. Still, one of my favorites was it was kind of a weird one for the site, but it fell into our lap because the woman who was working publicity for Grand Funk, had done a lot of our other clients, and she said, would you guys do something? And so I said sure, and so I wound up talking to Don Brewer, the drummer from Grand Funk.
Oh, cool!
And of course, that band being from Flint, Michigan.
You had a lot to talk about.
That was, they were one of their recording of
you
Locomotion.
Knew everything about them.
Was one of those records that was sort of burned in my brain. So it was really fun to find that, in the middle of it, to do something where I was like, when I was a little kid, I used to listen to this music, and now I'm talking to one of the...
So how do you approach that and interview the person and not become giddy almost,
Yeah. Well, that was one of the things, is a lot of those guys are really good about putting people at ease as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
It's just like, in that case, talking to Don, I said, hey, I grew up in Michigan. He's like, oh, where at? And I said, he's like, oh, you're a Youper. And so we had that, before we got into any music, we had just established some kind of rapport.
Right.
That where it was just like, we're just
real
two dudes
chill.
talking.
Right.
Yeah.
So that you don't go, oh my God, you're awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. So that, but that was fantastic practice, and I got a lot of positive feedback on it. I talked to somebody and they say, oh, great questions and things like that. So, yeah. So now we're about 2003. I'm back in Wichita.
You guys just flew back from Poland?
Yep.
And it just because semester ended or whatever it was?
Yeah, so it was a school. Sorry about that smack.
It's okay.
So it was a
I can take it out.
it was a 1-year appointment at this bilingual school, and that came to an end, and so then we came back, and then the Polish teacher went back there.
Okay.
And
So it was like an exchange type deal.
yeah.
Okay.
And the agreement is that both of them had to stay with their respective schools at least a year.
Okay.
So at that point, it was like, do we leave Wichita? Well, now we're in Wichita for at least a year.
One more year at least, yeah.
So you do the thing that you do, and you decide you're going to stay someplace for a while. You buy a house.
Sure. Sometimes that's not the best idea, but you don't know that hindsight.
Yeah.
What it is.
Yeah. So end of 2002, we did that. And I used to go to Harry's Uptown a lot. That was like our hangout when we were in graduate school. You know,
Heck yeah. I love Harry's.
Yeah.
I love it. It's just a good bunch of people, and there's always a good conversation going on, and they have sports and whatnot too. So
yeah. And you remember, you know, up until the smoking ban went into effect in
everybody's
Wichita.
just smoking.
Everybody's smoking, and there's that very particular Harry's cigarette smoke that would latch into your clothing.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. You have to wash your clothes afterwards. Kirby's is the same way.
Yeah.
It was the same way.
It was the same way, yeah. I think I think there's still residual smoke in the air at Kirby's.
I think so, too.
So at the end of 2002, I'm hanging out at Harry's one night with some of my grad school buddies, and they said, hey, so our friend Eric, his girlfriend, is working for this startup paper that's going to come out next year, and they're looking for somebody to write about music. And we said we had to get in touch with you. And that wound up being Mike Marlette's. And so I tracked him down, sent him a couple of clips, and he was like, Jesus, you're great.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you want to start? So that was early 2003.
Cool, yeah.
And
so start something great.
Yeah, that was it was like a turning point as well, because when I was in grad school, most of the people I knew were also grad students.
Right.
And none of us really were from here.
Right, from everywhere else but here,
Yeah,
sort of.
New York, Pennsylvania, etc. and so forth.
Right.
And so it was a very tiny community, but that started breaking up a little bit.
As people graduated and moved on and with their
some people started
schooling and things like that.
Yeah, some people, moved back to where they came from. Other people started jobs that, didn't allow them the same kind of social life.
Sure.
So that when Mike took me on at the paper, that was like the beginning of me actually meeting real Wichitans.
Okay. That makes sense. That's total sense, because you do get in your bubble.
Yeah.
When you're doing a program, it's a hard program. You need each other.
Yeah.
But everything else kind of falls to the wayside. And then once that is done or almost done, you start branching out, and that's what happened to you. And you started meeting Wichitans and finding out about the music scene here in Wichita, basically.
Yeah.
And so, and you're more, I think you favor more of the heavy metal type, metal rock type music.
I love everything.
Yeah?
Yeah.
You're open to everything?
I'm open to everything.
I like everything, too. I think I favor jazz and that kind of thing, and gypsy jazz and bluegrass a little bit. I'm not going to say I'm a greatest bluegrass fan, because my husband is, and I know I'm not that level ever. I like Beyonce as well, and, and I just like all music, too. So, but I know I tend to favor... If you give me a choice, I'll say, play 1940s jazz, please, and be totally happy with that. So,
yeah, no. So, well, I mean, that moment was also a confluence of that's where I met. I'd known of Michael Carmody, but I didn't know him.
Right.
So he was initially the managing editor at F5. So I met him.
Cool. Yeah.
And he would hip me to things. He'd be like, My friends Wayne and Kirk, they've got this band Split Lip Rayfield, and they're going to be doing this, like, they've been away for a while. Now they're going to do their first show. Maybe you'd think about covering that. And I was like,
oh, cool.
So it was like this entry, into
a whole scene.
A whole scene.
Yeah.
And your sister Lisa and Kirk were both also instrumental in introducing me to a lot of those people, because they were booking shows at what was then John Barleycorn's.
Right.
And Lisa would drop by a stack of CDs and say, here are the shows that I've got coming up. I've got this guy Mike West, or I've got this guy Mike Hosty.
And here are the posters.
Yeah.
I noticed a lot of old posters have my sister's handwriting on them. Like that one there. That's my sister's handwriting, no doubt about it.
I remember that gig with George Thorogood at the Cotillion. That might have been one of the first. I know I didn't go to that, but that might have been one of the first big split lip shows I remember hearing about.
Yeah.
Where it was like,
they were pretty proud of playing with George Thorogood and just the whole cotillion. It's just such a part of Wichita history.
Yeah.
You know? And it's just, when you get there, it's a pretty big deal. If you're a musician, I would say, yeah, you're pretty amped up about playing the cotillion.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So, I mean, I didn't, it was...
So you got involved with Michael at F5, and that kind of opened you up to this whole culture in Wichita that is really thriving. I mean, even now in a different way is really thriving. And I know everyone really loves you, Jedd, on KMEW. I mean, you're a staple. I think people would freak out if ever they said, "Oh, we're gonna change your time slot" or something. And people are like,
Well, that's very kind of you to say. So I hope I'm not going into too deep into the woods with any of this, because you asked me about radio. So radio. Yeah. This is 2003. So radio was still, and not even on my radar.
Right, you were writing.
I was gonna do. But yeah, through Michael and Lisa and Kirk, I don't think I ever even. Well, it turns out that, because I think Lisa was working at Borders at that time.
I remember. That was quite a long time ago.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
so when I finally met her, I said, "Oh, you're the the Borders lady. I've seen you 100 times, but we've never met. You're just this mysterious person who's leaving music for me."
Right. Always leaving it. Yeah.
At my office. It's like the Easter Bunny or something.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, yeah, through that, I mean, I met so many people, and of course, other people would then tell me, well, you like these guys in Elvis, you should really look back and find out about this band or that band.
Sure, yeah.
And, just kept on digging deeper and getting to know people.
Yeah.
And that was it was a very interesting time in so many ways.
Yeah. Like positive or negative or both?
Both.
Yeah.
Because I was still, there was no money to be made with F5.
Right.
And I was still teaching college English. I was working for a period of time at the Alumni Association on their magazine, The Shocker. Uh-huh. So I was I'd take on a couple of freelance jobs here and there that had some decent money attached to them. But I wasn't financially where
you weren't raking it in or anything.
And yet I was
don't worry about that.
Absolutely loving what I was doing.
Right.
So there's tension when that happens. It's like,
do I suck it up? Do I quit doing the thing I'm passionate about and do this thing where I'm going to feel bad? Possibly be depressed about for money. And you have to weigh the options and what's going to make you happier in the end. And it's tough, for anybody. That's something everyone has to kind of do. And for most people, I mean, I think some people just get handed a silver platter, but I never did. And obviously you never did either. So
yeah, I mean, there was times where it was like, well, why don't you apply for a tech writing job at Koch Industries? Or why don't you, think about working for one of the aircraft companies or something like that.
Right.
And luckily I was able to always have just enough work where I didn't have to find something else.
It was not down your chosen life dream or whatever. Yeah, that's cool.
But I think sometimes maybe my working at the Alumni Association, I think my boss was pretty cool about me being gone sometimes to go, do an interview or something like that. But there was,
it was a little close to that manufacturing job in a way.
It was a little close to being like, you kind of, we're paying you decent
Right.
money. Maybe your focus should be more here.
Oh, okay.
And then came the moment where she said, there's going to be we're going to make a full-time position for what you're doing.
Mm-hmm.
You can take this if you want, but if you do take it, then you've got to do away with everything else.
Oh, yeah, okay. So that sucks.
Yeah.
It's like, sign this non-disclosure form, Jedd.
Yeah. And my boss, Connie, is that was there, Connie White. She was
Yeah, I know Connie.
Yeah,
Yeah.
she was amazing, and she's so good to work for. But she kind of she sort of gave me that, and I said, well, I don't think I can give up in my heart, I can't give up the other stuff.
The passion is still there.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so, as it turned out, Michael Carmody was looking for a full-time job at that point.
Cool.
And I said, well, I'm quitting my job to pursue this dream of freelancing.
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you apply for this?
And he did?
And he did. And he wound,
Oh,
so he
cool.
wound up. So it was this weird kind of dance we had where we were not necessarily working directly together, but we were working in the same circles
Right.
at the same time.
So you kind of have always been cohorts together, you and Michael.
Yeah, and I mean, it was strange how that little office that had 2 offices in it,
Yeah.
right, and 3 desks at F5. So the other part of that equation was Julie Baker, now Julie Baker Bryn, who was editorial assistant, and she now works with me at KMUW.
Oh, cool.
And then later on, Mike Marlette and I would work together at Wichita City Paper for the 9 months or whatever that ran.
Right.
So within,
And I wish we still had that one. I loved that one. That's cool.
Yeah. So within 1 week of my life, I met people who almost, I don't know how many, it's not quite 20 years, but all these years later, I'm still somehow or other connected to.
Right. And you can, and with Michael, you can always, if you have something you haven't seen or don't have knowledge of, he probably does, because he just is this encyclopedia of knowledge sometimes.
Yeah.
Like, Mike, tell me about this, and he'll tell me the story. And I'm like, really? That? Sometimes we get on a tangent, but that's okay too.
Yeah.
I like tangents.
And I have to say, like, during that time too, being around Jake Euchre, who was a phenomenal writer and phenomenal brain.
Yeah, he was a great brain.
And he was, one of the things I did do during grad school for recreation was we would go to the Center for the Arts, and that's when he was doing the film series.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I went to several of those. And great. And he knew so much about them, and you would learn so much.
Yeah.
I would learn so much just being in the presence of someone who was so passionate about what they were doing.
Yeah.
I think. It just sucked you right in.
Yeah, so being in the same pages as him, and then Jason Bailey, who is now in New York City and has had bylines in the New York Times now.
Cool, yeah.
Being around those guys, and every week I would read their stuff and go, I got to do something that's as good as that.
Yeah, up each other's game.
Yeah.
So that's really cool too.
Yeah.
It's like when you're a musician and you're playing with people that are worse than you, you're not going to get any better. But
Right.
if you're playing with a whole bunch of people that are playing at your level or higher, you're going to just step up your game so that you can stay in their loop, and it's cool.
Yeah.
Jason Bailey is really cool.
Yeah. And, and then Jake one day, I don't know what we were doing. I didn't see him a lot socially.
Yeah.
But it was like a time where I did see him socially, and he said, Jedd, I really like what you do with language.
Cool.
and
That is the biggest damn compliment. I bet you're over the moon that day.
Yeah, I was like, okay, all right. I'm either going to get that tattooed or it's going to go on the headstone. I don't know.
Really like what you're doing with language. That's cool.
Yeah.
Jake was so discerning, you know, and I love that about him. So he's a big loss to the community. I know a lot of people miss him. There's a whole website, if you're listening and you're on Facebook, there's a whole website dedicated to Jake Euchre, and you can just look it up. It's cool.
Yeah.
The people stories and stuff. So, so basically from there, you're transitioning into a new field at KMUW, and what did you do to prepare yourself with that type of you're listening to yourself and critiquing yourself with a lot of very intellectual people. So there's a lot of input, I'm sure.
Well, so what happened was, we did F5, and then that got sold, and we started up Wichita City paper, and that came to an end in early 2007. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden, I had always taught during the summertime. Uh-huh. I wasn't teaching that summer. I had unemployment, meaning I had to go out and apply for jobs every couple of weeks. And I was applying for things, but nothing was really coming through. Okay. And I didn't know what I was going to do. Right. I'd get up and I'd mow the lawn, go mow the neighbor's lawn, right? Sit around the house. And then one day, Lou Ann Stevens from KMUW called me, and she said, "Hey, so you're not doing the newspaper thing right now?" And I said, "No." And she said, "Well, I want to start a 24-hour music service on HD radio." Okay. Because right around 2007, 2008, that was going to be the future. It was going to be high definition radio.
And digital. We're going digital. Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, are you kidding me?" Yeah. So.
Jump off the couch and get out there.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so she came. She came to me and just said, here's kind of what I'm thinking. Mm-hmm. But let's just see what you put together. So I went in and I made like an audition show. Or two. Right. And then...
Did you have any helpers, or was it just you on your own mess with stuff?
I had somebody spend 20 minutes with me, maybe, showing me how to operate everything in the studio.
What their machinery does, and
yep.
And don't mess it up.
Yep. And then...
Bye.
Go for it.
Wow.
So I made a couple of those audition shows, and she listened to them, and a couple other people listened to them, and they said, okay.
Yeah. We like the way you sound, like the way it's going.
Yeah.
You're on like a roll.
Yeah.
Did they listen to it before you could launch it, or were you just like, just don't cuss and da 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 da?
Yeah, I mean, basically, it was just a couple of months of they weren't sure how they were going to get it onto the air, because in order to launch the HD was a little bit of a headache. Mm-hmm. So I was just making these shows, and every once in a while they'd sort of check in with me.
Right.
And then I was doing air shifts during the daytime too, during like the Political Junkie and things like that, like
and
midday.
Just changing the engineering type stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So reading the time and the weather, and coming up in the next segment, the three-toed sloth. Why is it so amusing?
And what the temperature is. And whatnot.
Yeah, so I mean, I had in college I had done 2 air shifts at the college station for like 5 minutes. Okay. And then the program director was so just overbearing and cruel that I just I did my final Sunday morning shift, and I said, what, I'm not going to be back. It's been a fun 2 weeks.
Oh gosh. I've been in a job like that, but it was Applebee's. So it was terrible. I walked in and walked out 15 minutes later, nope.
Yeah.
Never in a million years.
That's the worst, because those kinds of jobs, I've had so little experience being that miserable. Right. And that was
an eye opener.
Miserable experience. Yeah. So that was my only radio experience to that point.
So you didn't really have this great glamorous type thing about radio in your mind. You had this kind of a little bit of a dark cloud of a experience.
Well, yeah, I mean, the only way that radio sort of came onto my into my life was, there were 2 things. One was when I was a kid, my oldest brother, who's 16 years older, he had this incredible record collection. He graduated high school in 1974, so you could imagine all the music that was popular right at that time. So before I was in elementary school, I'd heard half of the Jethro Tull discography. And
whoa. You were a little more advanced.
Yeah. I was, by the time I got to 6th grade, I was sick of the Doors. I was like, those guys are so passé. I'm not even sure I like Pink Floyd anymore, man.
Oh, go on. Yeah. You're done with all of it. You had heard it a million times.
Yeah. And that must have been annoying for my peers who were like, "Wow, who
Look
does
what
he
I just
think?"
discovered. What? You yucked on their yum, Jedd.
Yeah, I did. But I would play records all the time, and one of my other brothers said, you should be a DJ, and I just kind of laughed that off. And then in high school, we had this class called occupations.
Okay.
And so at the beginning of the at the beginning of the semester, you take this aptitude test.
Uh-huh.
And so my number one aptitude, to nobody's surprise, was music, and it was like the gap between that and whatever my next level of interest was like clerical work or something. Was huge. There was nothing else that could compete with music.
Music.
Yeah.
You have a mind for music.
And my parents weren't really. I had an uncle who had been a musician, and that didn't. He went through
jive
some.
For him.
Yeah, he went through some rough stuff with that. As it's not.
No, yeah, it's a hard life. It's a selling life. You're always on the road in a different place, and it's a hard life. So your parents don't want you to have a hard life; they want you to have a easy life.
Yeah, and
right.
my dad would, and my dad worked with guys who had tried to do things professionally, and were now weekend warriors. And
right.
He's like
not the best people too sometimes.
Yeah.
and whatnot. Yeah, I know.
He's like, you gotta really push for it. And so what I wound up doing was I wound up interviewing this guy Jim Callow, who owned this station in the area called Hits 106.
In this area?
No, in where I grew up.
Okay.
It was in Marinette, which is right over into the Wisconsin border.
Okay.
But and it was at that time it was the hip station in town because they would occasionally play like deep cuts and things like that.
Oh, okay.
In addition,
so like the college station in a way.
In a way,
yeah.
Or closest thing that we would get in that area to that. And so I wound up interviewing him, and I was just blown away because he told me the story about how he was able to interview Kenny Rogers.
Whoa!
And I
fancy, like during The Gambler, serious.
Yeah, and he was like, well, Kenny's a smart guy. He knows the music business is cyclical, so he goes away and he runs his chicken shops or whatever for a couple of years, and then he comes back and he does more music. And I thought, this Jim Callow guy is really smart.
Yeah.
But that was it. That was the extent of it. And then I looked at how much somebody made in radio at that time, and it was less than a Catholic high school teacher, and I knew that it was...
Yikes. I feel it. I feel the pain.
Yeah.
I'm a public service worker myself, and this is my hobby, so, yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a lucrative thing. You just
Yeah.
gotta... But it's a passionate thing.
Yeah.
And it's kind of, you don't get the chance to talk to people this way just every day, where you're focused on each other. Usually there's a lot of other interruptions going on in your life. So that's cool, and you get to research people and find out a little bit about them that you wouldn't know. And it's kind of nice to talk to people too, just because it's a therapeutic thing to do.
Yeah.
I find.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So from all your experiences trying to get to being a college graduate in English, and now you're pretty much one of the best known DJs here in Wichita for college and more eccentric type musics that I prefer rather than listening to like a pop station or something like that. Is there any kind of thing that you learned about what you do that could help me as a person, as an interviewer?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's funny because it's. I just I go to the studio and I do my thing and I don't think about it. Right.
Right. It's kind of robotic now to you. Or?
Well, I don't think about like. I imagine if you would have told me when I was 15 and I took that aptitude test that someday I'd get to talk to Gene Simmons of Kiss or something, I would have been like, whoa, hello.
Right.
Or that I'd meet all these, cool people in my now local community and things like that. But so I I don't think about it in that way. It's
right.
It's my job, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But I guess the thing is that I came to realize that it's a big deal to the audience.
Right.
And so
these are their people they think they know and they want to know more, So
like, sometimes I'll play a song and then all of a sudden I get a text message or I get an email or I get a Facebook message and somebody says, "Oh, you played this song and I've been going through this really tough time in my life with such and such, and that spoke to me," or whatever that was. I've never heard that before, but man, I feel like it was like coming right into my soul.
Yeah.
And so I think that's like one thing that I try not ever to be jaded and think like, "Oh, I'm just going to put a stupid show together."
Right.
But
because there are the chance, the maybe finite chance that you do speak to somebody that day.
Yeah.
So it's a big responsibility to you to not just make it a ho-hum situation, but a special thing every night. And you do it every night, almost every night of the week, 6 nights a week.
Yeah.
And that's a lot. I mean, I produce this every 2 or 3 weeks. And I mean, you want to talk about somebody kind of curmudgeonly coming down the stairs sometimes because I'm tired and I just did this and I did that. But then I listen and I get a chance to listen. Yeah. And you have to participate. And I think that's the really cool part about editing, the editing process, is being able to listen to someone again after you've already had the same conversation. And it's just, I laugh more probably while I'm editing at what people are saying in our conversation, because I'm just like, that is so clever, or that's really good thing to say. Yeah. From them, not from me. From them, because when you listen to yourself, you're like,
Oh yeah, I know. That was. I still remember the first time I heard myself. I had made it was right maybe before Strange Currency was about to launch on the main station, because I did do a year on HD, and I made this promo, and I was at 13th and Oliver, Central and Oliver. Okay. And I was taking a CD out of my CD player, and the radio came on. Of course, when you slide the CD out of the CD player, the radio comes on, and I hear, "I'm Jedd Beaudoin," and I like looked like, where the hell is this voice coming from?
Wow, what's going on here? Yeah. So you got to hear yourself, and you're like, "Oh, that's what
I sound like.
That's really what I sound like." Yeah. Bring down a little.
Yeah.
I feel you, and everybody who I've had, they always go, "Oh, I sound," I said, "Did you listen to your podcast?" And they'll say, "Yeah, I listened to it, but I'm just not really comfortable with listening to myself." And I'm like, "Well, what about me?" I have to listen to me every single time, and I'm not either. I do purchasing for a living, so I'm not used to this either. So I'm always like, I feel your pain. Trust me.
I guess that thing that we were talking about, just each time is like, you just approach it like that. I mean, it might not change, this conversation might not change our lives, but
it could change someone else's.
Yeah, somebody might be listening going, "Oh, that's how you that's how you do it.
This is what I'm doing wrong all the time." Like that's the way I look at it. Is I listen to podcasts a lot. I learn a lot from listening to people's interactions, and like I interrupt too much. Talk too much on my own. But.
Well, that's the thing too that I think people sometimes don't believe about me, and I think I'm a little bit different now than what I was maybe 20 years ago. But I'm not a particularly outgoing person. I'm not particularly talkative.
Right.
So I mean, you put me on a phone with a stranger who I have like no stakes with. I'm not gonna hang out with this person, right?
Right.
We've got 15, 20 minutes, whatever, and we're gonna talk about music. And so it's like they're just go in, get to it, and it's satisfying because there's no other attachment to it than that,
Yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
That's a really good way to look at it, because I don't find myself, I mean, I'm talkative by nature, but I don't walk into a place and just start jibber jabbering with everybody. I'm pretty reserved. Like, I go get a drink and kind of wait to see what's going on and kind of get my fill. And so that's different from doing this. By all means, I'm here and I want to, like, find out the most about you and find out if there's any inspirational thing that you want to tell other people. But I'm also, just wanting to interact with someone on a one-on-one basis.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I think the one of the more sort of accidentally profound things that I've ever heard was, oh gosh, I can't remember if it was a Rush documentary or just an interview, and one of the guys in the band, I can't remember which one, said something about, as they were coming up, they were making the music they wanted to hear.
Yeah.
And
exactly.
I was like, oh, well, that's what I should be doing with my work. Is I want to make the show that I want to hear, and hopefully somebody will
want to hear it too. Yeah, and I think that's a beautiful way to look at it. And so, is there anything else that you want to say to anyone?
Oh man, again, a guy who doesn't talk much.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
And coming down all the way out here to Park City, which we're about 2 blocks from Wichita.
Yeah.
But
well, this is an amazing space. You've got the listeners, of course, can't see it, but instruments on the wall. The whole, the house is just very, very indicative of the people who live here, which isn't always the case. Sometimes you walk into somebody's house and it's like, really?
Yeah.
Wow, I never would have imagined this person lived in this place.
Right. Well, thank you, Jedd. And
yeah.
I appreciate you for coming. And,
yeah, thanks for having me.
And you're welcome anytime.
Okay.
And your voice sounds awesome, by the way.
Oh,
and
thank you.
Thank you so
You're
much
doing a
for
great
what
job.
you do for Wichita.
Oh, thank you.
All right. And that's it.
That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Jedd Beaudoin, for coming on the show. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. Thank you for catching a pocket with me today and with our friends here in the internet in the future. Okay, the Catch a Pocket podcast was brought to you by me, and we are being hosted by Podbean.com. Podbean does everything for you and your podcast. You can listen to this podcast on Apple, iTunes, and also Google Play Podcasts, and also TuneIn, and also whatever else, Spotify, anywhere you want, you can listen to us. You can write us at catchapocket@gmail.com, and we'd love to write you back, and we'd love to hear what you have to say. And thanks for listening, guys, because without you, I'm not going to continue to do this. So it's really fun to do, and I appreciate learning a lot about my guests, and I can't wait to get a new bunch up in the queue so that I can edit and get them out there to you guys. Catch a Pocket is the podcast from Wichita, Kansas, about local artists and celebrities I think have a great story to tell. So keep supporting us, keep listening, keep writing, and we'll keep going. So with that, I hope you all catch a pocket you can be proud of. See you next time.